Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Connie Butera, and you will know me as a parent mentor with the Children's Treatment Network, as well as someone who has successfully completed the Autism Certificate program that's offered by Carey's Place Autism Services. I'm also a local volunteer with an organization called Life with a Baby, as well as I've organized some events through Project Autism York Region in the past, and overall I'm just a local autism mom. So before I start this presentation about our journey to medication, I just wanted to preface this series by mentioning that I am not a doctor, and by any means I'm not promoting medication in any way. I'm just merely speaking about our family's personal journey towards starting medication for our own children. And so I'd love to share our experience to help you and your family perhaps make this very important decision for yourself if it's appropriate for your family, but also both being mindful to the fact that you absolutely need to consult with your doctor. So if you've come across this presentation, I would imagine that you're a parent who's currently at crossroads and perhaps at the very important decision as to whether or not considering medication is something that's right for you and your family and for your child. I totally understand what you're going through. I've been there and I've done that, and we've been that family at that critical crossroad point ourselves. And I just want to let you know that you're absolutely not alone and that you are not a bad parent for even considering medication for your child. I know there's a lot of stigma around this topic, and I went through it myself, and I put a lot of mother's guilt on myself as well, wondering whether or not this was the right choice for my child. But I want you to know that you are doing everything right, and all the services and supports and resources that you've currently utilized for your child have brought you to this point of perhaps thinking that you might need something a little bit more. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with you watching this video and asking other friends and parents who've been through this journey and doing your research, because that's all part of beginning this journey. So at the time that I'm recording this video, my son is now 10 years old, but I want to take you back to at least 4 years ago when he was around 6 years old and explain to you a little bit about what we were dealing with, because it's important to understand why we made the decision to start exploring medication. So back when he was 6 years old, and I should also mention that he has an older diagnosis where we would use the terms high functioning, fully verbal, formally would have been considered Asperger's. So it's important to understand where my son was at on the spectrum. But what we were dealing with was very typical. We were dealing with a lot of anger, a lot of aggression, a lot of physical outbursts. He was starting to be quite dangerous to himself and others, just with a lot of his, I would say, poor judgment making, and with a lot of his meltdowns. As he was getting older, he was getting stronger, and his physical outbursts were becoming more violent. For example, throwing chairs at the class, classroom kids and teacher having to leave the classroom because of the physical outbursts, extremely distractible and at flight risk. So if he was in a meltdown moment, I wasn't sure if he would, and he had, run out of the classroom, run out of the school, release my grip and try to run away from me, and heaven forbid that should happen in a parking lot, or if he were to go missing. And just, I was getting a lot of phone calls from the school, like daily, weekly phone calls about a lot of incidences. It was really starting to weigh on us, as well as I would imagine him. And he was always in trouble. We never really had good days. Every day there was some major incident that had to be addressed. And so in his mind, he was always in trouble, and things were never really going the way he had wanted. And we were just really starting to question his overall mental health and how all this trouble he was always in and all these poor decisions that were happening, how that was affecting his overall quality of life, and in turn our family and our quality of life as a family. We were starting to withdraw from, attending a lot of social events, seeing family, seeing friends. We couldn't do a lot of the things that normal families with kids our age could do, because we knew that for our son that it could be a huge challenge and a huge risk. So those were some of the behaviors that we were starting to deal with. So once again, if I look back and I sort of think about how my son was feeling, and I know I would ask him these questions, his thoughts in mind was that he was always in trouble, that we probably didn't love him because of all the trouble he was always getting in, and, having privileges removed and spending a lot of time in timeout or in his room as a result of the trouble that he was getting in. He felt like we had too many rules, and in hindsight, we had rules so that we could protect him and protect others. We felt like we couldn't really do anything as a family, or that we couldn't take him anywhere because of the risks that were involved in doing that. He was starting to notice that kids really didn't want to play with him, and that he was having trouble making and keeping friends because of the incidences that would occur when he would play with friends. And so he would also find that he would be bored. And of course, if a child is bored, they typically get into more trouble and become more annoying. And so these are some of the feelings that he was expressing, that he was feeling, and that we were seeing. As a family, we were basically at our wits' end financially, and I'll review all the services and supports we were utilizing at that time. It was really starting to rack up. At one point, we were upwards of $1,700 a month in private services and supports for our son. So the financial stress of all of that was really starting to weigh on us. The overall stress that we had as a family, just sort of dealing with the behaviors. As a result, my ex-husband and I, we were having some major marital issues. We ultimately went through a divorce, and I'm not going to blame it in any case on having special needs children, but obviously life stress gets to a marriage. I had genuine fear as a mother. I worried about, what if my son did get hurt, or what if someone else seriously got hurt as a result of one of his meltdowns? What if he ran away? Like I said, what if he got hit by a car running away from me? So those fears were really starting to weigh on us as a family. And I was really starting to feel myself, the social gap with family and friends, and the inability to sort of participate in regular activities that other families were doing with children our age, and the isolation as a family and as a mom. All of these were starting to weigh on us. So when I go to bed at night, or whenever I have a moment of guilt, I'm wondering, why did I medicate my child? Or, was this the right decision? I go to bed at night and I know that I literally did everything that I possibly could for my child. Before we explored medication, all the natural environmental options that exist out there, we did them. And I've had many service providers and many doctors tell us and our family that our child was literally, an example of a child who was so well supported and who had received every service and support that you can think of that's out there. So this list covers all of that. We did everything from IBI therapy to ABA therapy, occupational therapists. We had a sensory diet in place. We had an amazing relationship with our child's school. We were really lucky. He was receiving almost one-to-one support at school when he needed it. He had a proper IEP in place. We had amazing principals and teachers and EAs working with him. We even tried the dietary changes. They weren't realistic for us to maintain long term, but we did try as long as we could: the gluten-free, the dairy-free, the limiting sugar, eliminating dyes, and we still partake in many of those things still today. We made sure that we were mindful to any environmental changes we could do and sensory awareness changes. We, provided headphones, fidget toys, quiet environments, gave sensory breaks, and all of those components were always accommodated. I even explored essential oils for a period of time. He went to school wearing lavender oil, and at night we would put lavender oil to help with sleep, to help with settling and hyperactivity. He was being seen regularly by a therapist and by his pediatrician. He had psychologist visits and reviews. He attended social skills classes, many social skills classes. We, put him in camps, specialized autism camps, as well as typical camps with supports. We were receiving respite as a family as needed when he attended those camps. And absolutely, obviously, we took the parent education. I have literally taken almost every class you can think of that's offered in our community by our service agencies, including getting a certificate in autism myself. So once again, I go to bed at night knowing that I literally provided my child everything I possibly could as recommended by professionals. With everything that we did and everything that we provided for our child, it still wasn't enough. And so this was the turning point. And so we basically took a family vacation. We went on a cruise. And because we were with our child for a period of 2 weeks solid in a new social scenario, we really got to see firsthand over the period of this 2-week vacation, the challenges that my son was having on a daily basis, and also dealing with it, hand over hand as a family over that 2-week vacation period. And it was as a result of our experience over that family vacation that we came back from it, and we really made the decision that it was time to really consider medication. We reflected on the trip that we had, and in speaking to my son, he physically said, "Mommy, I wish you could open up my head and fix my brain." And so looking back, my opinion was that was my 6-year-old child's way of telling me that he needed more, that he needed our help. He needed a way for us to help him, because you could always see his empathy and his compassion towards, the bad situations that we ended up in. And he felt bad, and he really did feel like he was losing control, and that regardless of all the services and supports he was receiving, he wasn't able to really apply any of what he was learning because his brain and body just wasn't allowing that. And so that's sort of how we knew it was time to take that next step. So immediately after returning from that family vacation, I drove my son right to Sick Kids Hospital Emerge. What I will say is that here in our area of York Region, Ontario, Canada, specifically, Newmarket, Aurora area, sometimes it can be very, very long before you can get in to see a pediatrician. In our area, you need to have a special need and a referral from your family doctor in order to see a pediatrician. And we had already had one at the time to go see Dr. Malera, who works out of Newmarket. Unfortunately, the wait list just for an initial consult to see him was over 6 months at that point. And I hadn't even heard back from his office secretary as to when our first consult would be, let alone, actually getting an appointment to start diving in deeper into medication. And we couldn't wait another 6 months. We were in crisis. So for that reason, we drove down to Sick Kids Hospital to Emerge. And I basically said, listen, I need immediate referral to a pediatrician. I need to see someone right away about exploring medication because my son is in crisis. I explained some of the recent incidences that had happened, some of the outbursts that had happened, and my level of concern for my child. And the good thing that came from that was that they were able to give me an immediate referral to the Newmarket Path Clinic, and I think the appointment was within a week or two, we were able to get an emergency referral to go see Dr. Michael Hill at the Newmarket Path Clinic. And what an amazing decision that was. And I'm so glad that I trust my mother's instinct to go to Sick Kids that day, because we did go see Dr. Michael Hill. And as a result of our initial meeting with him, we immediately started our process and our journey towards exploring medications for my son. So after showing Dr. Hill the diagnosis that we had and sharing a lot of our experience as to the behaviors we were experiencing, Dr. Hill suggested that we initially start with a medication called Risperidone. And if you research Risperidone, you will see that it's known to treat irritability in autism, as well as it's known to help with physical outbursts. It also has other things that it deals with and treats, which you can research and read about on your own. But with respect to autism, it deals with just overall irritability and with the physical outbursts, which was like the main thing that we were dealing with at the time and that we needed to get to the bottom of. And so when we heard about Risperidone, I had never heard about it in the past. I was like, yes, that's a great place to start. And so obviously with every medication, there are side effects. With Risperidone, one of the side effects is that your child will have increased appetite and that they can rapidly start to gain weight. Now, in the case of my child, that wasn't a huge concern for me because he was already pretty thin and tall, so I was okay if he gained weight. And if anything, we thought that that could benefit him. So sure enough, we had that side effect, and it wasn't anything astronomical. If anything, the weight gain he experienced was good for him. Risperidone is also known to perhaps produce milk in even boys in their breasts. So sometimes you need to keep a lookout for that, or sometimes you can get some swelling in the breast area. We did at one point have one breast that got a little bit like of a bump and swollen, but it quickly dissipated. We never really had any of those issues, but I did want to mention that we did have a little bit of swelling in one of the breasts at one point, which we kept an eye on and which eventually went away. And with Risperidone, you do have to do regular blood work just so that you can keep an eye on the metabolics, because sometimes metabolically it can do some fun things. So it's important, and your doctor will order this when you start Risperidone, that you also keep up on that regular blood work. But the benefits from starting this medication far outweighed any of the side effects that we saw. We saw way less physical outbursts. We saw our child generally less agitated and in an overall better mood. He was a happier kid. We were starting to get better reports from school, less reports from school on the bad stuff at least. And we just felt like our family life got better. We felt like kids weren't arguing as much. Everyone was way better behaved. Everyone was content. Everyone seemed happier. Honestly, he looked great. He benefited from that little bit of weight gain, and we were really lucky. We didn't have any of the issues with the blood work. So overall, our introduction to Risperidone was a very, very positive experience. As recommended, we maintained obviously our relationship with our pediatrician, and he was seen very regularly when he started Risperidone. We kept up on the blood work, we kept up on those visits, and we never experienced any issues. We did go in regularly to see the doctor and made medication adjustments, which is to be expected, especially as your child gets older. They put on weight, they, especially if they're putting weight on with the medication, if they're getting a little taller, you may start to see a decline in behavior again, which is generally signs that you need to go back to your doctor and probably do a medication adjustment. So it was great working with Dr. Hill. Every time we started to see a regular decline in behavior and we knew that he had had a weight gain and a height change, we would go back to Dr. Hill and he would slowly increase the Risperidone medication as needed and as was safe. However, with that in mind, while we were dealing with the physical outbursts and the general irritability, we weren't quite getting the whole spectrum of the behaviors that we were dealing with covered. So in building our relationship for about a year and a half at this point with Dr. Hill, and starting to express that although the physical outbursts were well taken care of, as well as the general mood, the irritability, we were seeing a lot of hyperactivity, a lot of impulsive, compulsive decision-making and behaviors, just a generally very silly, kind of annoying child. And obviously the school was coming back to us with the same sort of feedback. It was also affecting concentration and focus, and as a result was affecting school grades and even just socially ability to make and keep friends. And so with these types of reports, Dr. Hill eventually had us do some further testing, and it was determined that he was also ADHD. And we knew that in opening up that door to ADHD, and rightfully so because he was, and we got that additional diagnosis, that would also open up the door for exploring ADHD medications, because unless you have an ADHD diagnosis, you don't usually take ADHD medications. So now we weren't just dealing with autism, we were also now dealing with ADHD, and so now we could explore the realm of ADHD medications, which would help perhaps calm him down a little bit, promote that attention and focus, and so that we could get some other benefits. I should add here that it's absolutely common to have dual or multiple diagnoses when you're dealing with autism. It's very, very common that your child could be autistic and ADHD, or autistic and OCD, ODD, have anxiety, depression. And I'm not saying that they necessarily will be or have to be, but it is common that you could be dealing with more than just autism. So it's very important, once again, to maintain that relationship with your doctor and to be open to the idea that you could be dealing with more. So always be open with your doctor about all the different behaviors that you're dealing with, so that you can be mindful to the fact that you could be dealing with more. And as a result, when dealing with medications, it also opens up more doors to perhaps more medications that you can explore. So after successfully receiving the ADHD diagnosis, we then started with our first ADHD medication under the direction of our doctor, which was Adderall. Very, very common. Lots of people take Adderall. We did see some of the side effects, which are very understandable. With any ADHD medication, it's usually common that the child will actually have a suppressed appetite, not be as hungry, not feel as hungry at least. And so sometimes the whole eating thing can be a challenge. In addition, sometimes kids experience some issues with sleep. I know our bedtime, we would still put him to bed at the same time. However, we would notice it would take him sometimes even up to an hour to fully settle and fall asleep. So those are things to be mindful of. However, once again, the benefits that we gained far outweighed any of the side effects. We saw better attention, better focus, better overall behavior. Because of the attention and focus, we were getting better grades at school, and just in general, his overall quality of life was better. We were doing so much better now that we had opened that door to ADHD and had explored those ADHD medications to help with that other side of behaviors that weren't previously being dealt with on Risperidone alone. As we had experience with Risperidone, same with Adderall, as the child gains weight, gets older, gets taller, even just as they become more used to the medication, it's very, very common that you might have to have a medication adjustment. And so we would slowly, under the direction of our doctor, revise the prescription as needed, and we slowly increased Adderall when we started to see those declines in behaviors again, and when the weight and height started to change. After a while, though, we were taking the most that we could of Adderall, and we weren't seeing the behaviors last long enough in the day. So whereas before we would find it would last the full day, slowly our day started getting shorter and shorter, to which, come 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were already coming off the medication and burning through it, and we were starting to see some of these negative behaviors come back. So that's how we knew it was time to maybe explore a different medication, because Adderall was shorter lasting. So because we needed something that lasted a little longer in the day, beyond 2 o'clock, we needed to get him through the school day, and ideally home from school and through homework and dinner, and ideally our family time in the evening. We then decided to move from Adderall to Vyvanse. Vyvanse is known to last a little longer in the system, and so this is the medication that he's currently taking today, and that seems to be working really well, and that gets us through our entire day. Once again, we still have suppressed appetite, and sometimes we have a little bit hard time falling asleep at night, but still the benefits are outweighing those 2 side effects that we're seeing. And we seem to manage those side effects really well with just encouraging him that his medication is just tricking him into thinking he's not hungry, but you still need to feed your body 3 meals a day at least, as well as snacks. And we seem to be working through those, and Vyvanse is working really, really well for us even until today. Medication is absolutely a journey, and it's very common that as you build your relationship with your doctor and as your child gets older, things might need to be added, changed, removed, increased, decreased. So we are not here yet, but we know that as of right now, we are on a pretty high maximum dosage of Vyvanse, and if we are starting to see some of those bad behaviors come back again, then we know it's time that we need to go to the next step in our personal journey, which our doctor has already sort of given us the heads up that our next step will likely be to introduce a new medication called Intuniv. Apparently Intuniv helps smoothen the edges. Smoothening the edges, any parent who has children on ADHD medications will know that until they get that medication in the morning, and also at the end of the day when that medication is starting to wear off, those times can be really challenging. So a medication like Intuniv, from what the doctor describes to me, helps smoothen those edges, which means helps sort of boost those morning periods and those evening periods where the medication of Vyvanse is not perhaps working 100% yet. It helps make those periods of time a little bit easier on everyone, including the child obviously taking the medication. So we are not here yet. Hopefully we don't get here anytime soon or even never, but we know that when and if that time comes, we may need to add on this additional medication. In addition, we've recently had another appointment with a psychiatrist just to follow up on our original diagnosis and sort of what we're seeing now that we're in the preteen stage of our journey with our son, and we're starting to see some more of the, I guess, mental health side that goes along with puberty. And so we were advised that perhaps in time, not now and maybe never in the future, but it's something to be mindful of, we may need to consider something for depression and anxiety. It's very common that especially around grade 7 or so, sometimes the kids really start to struggle with their overall mental health and some of the feelings that they're having in relation to themselves, their life, their social situations. And so if we ever have concerns with respect to anxiety and depression, we know that there's also medications for that, and the ones that we've been told that we should keep a lookout for that would probably work well for our child would be Prozac or Zoloft. Apparently those ones are known to work really, really well with Risperidone and with Vyvanse, and so those would likely be the ones we would try if we ever get to that point that day. But once again, we will deal with that when we get there, if we ever get there. And it's just important to sort of have that education and information before you need it, if you need it, so you know to look out for those signs and symptoms. And our doctor has already sort of told us what to keep a lookout for so that we know when and if it's time that we need to start something like that. So as a parent mentor, and even through my personal experience, I completely understand that it's very, very common to have two parents who are not on the same page in terms of whether or not to start medication with your child. Or perhaps it's not even a parent. Perhaps it's also feedback from your family or friends or just sort of negative social stigma. It's really important to note that the decision to start medication is a family decision, and it's absolutely important that you get you and your partner on the same page in terms of whether or not this is something that you're going to explore. However, that's always not such an easy process. So what I like to tell my, mentees that I work with is it's important to do all the other natural methods and to sort of exhaust all other efforts before you decide to go down the road of medication. Because once again, I go to bed at night knowing that I tried everything else with my son. It's not like I go to bed thinking that, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that, or maybe if I tried this. No, I did it all and I tried it all, and I'm at peace with myself knowing that I did that. So I encourage you to do the same as a family. Look through the list that I posted of all the different services and supports that are out there. Go through it, talk to your local service providers, talk to your doctor, see if there's anything else that you haven't tried that perhaps you can try, so that when and if you decide to go down the medication route, you can do that having full confidence that you've exhausted all other efforts, and leave the medication to sort of a last effort approach, so that you can have that confidence. On the same token, if you do have a partner, a parent, a relative who is really giving you a hard time about the idea of starting medication, it's really important to sort of look at where everyone is at in terms of the parent education component. Oftentimes, I find that one parent is getting all the information, taking the classes, networking in the autism community, and then the other parent has not had that same information and education. And so that creates the divide between the parties in terms of making this important decision. So if you're finding that you and your partner or relative are not on the same page, it's important to both get on the same page with at least having the same information. I highly recommend that you reach out to your local service agencies here in this area. That would be Carey's Place, Children's Treatment Network. Have both parents, have all parties, make sure they take the same classes, at least the introduction to autism class that's offered free of charge at Carey's Place Autism Services. If you don't understand the diagnosis, and if you don't understand your child, and if you don't go to bed at night knowing that you've tried every other efforts, you can't possibly make a decision as large as this. So please make sure that everyone is on the same page and getting the same information. Bring both parties into these appointments. It's not good enough to just have one parent or party there because they're not getting the same information. It's important that you're both there and hearing the doctor and getting it at the same time. And involve your doctor in that decision-making process. Ask the doctor the questions, express your concerns, make a pros and cons list. Like with everything I do, if you're not 100% sure, write them down. Write down all the positive things that could come from medication, and then write down all the negatives and then weigh them out. And you'll see from my experience that I shared with the different medications that, we had a couple of cons, the biggest one being, suppressed appetite and sleep, but those things were very well managed, and the benefits that we saw were so much far outweighed versus those cons that it made the decision very, very clear that we were making the right choice. So do the same in your decision-making process. And also speak to other families, speak to other parents, contact Children's Treatment Network, ask to be paired with a parent mentor such as myself to help make that decision. Also remember that medication doesn't have to be forever, and it may not be forever. You can definitely trial and explore with medication. So if you're also not 100% sure on if this is right for your family, commit yourself even over a summer. Kids are off of school in the summer. Perhaps you have a little bit more time as a family during the summer. Experiment with medication over the summer. That way you can monitor your child, and you can decide at the end of let's say a 6-month period, whether or not this is going to be something you guys want to stick with or that you don't want to stick with. Treat it as a child, treat it as a journey, and remember that it doesn't have to be forever, and in many cases, it's not forever. So if you've decided to take the leap to start medication, here's a few tips I have for you. Number one, find an amazing pediatrician. We were really, really lucky to work with Dr. Michael Hill at the Newmarket Path Clinic. I'm sure there's a lot of great pediatricians out there. I've also heard that there's some not so great pediatricians out there. My recommendation is to network in the local autism community, ask on some of the local social media pages. I love Project Autism York Region. I love the Ontario Autism Coalition on Facebook. Ask other moms in that group who they're seeing and if they like them. Go to ratemydoctor.com, search Google reviews there, and make sure that you find the pediatrician that you mesh well with. If you get paired with one from your family doctor that you don't think is going to be a right fit, ask for a new referral. Do research, ask for a new referral until you find the right doctor, because once again, this is going to be a long-term relationship, and you want to make sure that you're able to build that relationship with a doctor that you truly like to work with. Also, it's extremely important that you keep your communication very open during this time. I've heard of parents who get a diagnosis of their child, who even start medication for their child, and they keep it a complete secret. That's not a good idea. Especially when trying new medication, it's very important that anyone who's caring for your child and working with your child is fully aware of what they're taking, especially if there's been a recent medication change or adjustment, the side effects to keep a lookout for. Be open with your school. There's no shame in sharing the diagnosis as well as the medications that your child is on, and especially if there's been any recent changes, because your school spends 8 hours a day with your child, so it's important that they're aware of any changes and side effects so that they can help you and report back to you if they're seeing any of that at school, and that everyone is on the same page. And also, just never lose your relationship with your doctor. Make sure that it's not just a one-time consult thing and you're done. Make sure you're booking those regular follow-up visits and maintaining that relationship long-term, because it is going to be a long-term journey and process. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in on this particular session about my journey, our family's journey with our child on the spectrum who is also ADHD, in the whole process of exploring medication. I will say that overall it was absolutely the right decision for our child, for our family, and we are reaping all the benefits of the proper medication suited to treat the symptoms and signs that we were going through, and we are very, very happy with the results that we're having. Be sure to check out my other videos in my autism series, and I look forward to sharing some more information with you as a local autism parent moving forward.